I'm just waiting for it to say that we're doing it. I think so. Let me just double check. I think it's working. I think we're back on the record. We're okay? Okay. This is the afternoon in the matter of PSC case number 9738, the Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, Inc.'s application for adjustments to its retail rates and charges for electric distribution service and other tariff revisions. My name's Christine Burke. I'm the public utility law judge that's been assigned this case. The second part of today's hearing, I believe we're going to pick up with the direct testimony of Office of People's Counsel, witness Ron Nelson. Mr. Nelson, if you could please take the stand.
It is now on.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the testimony that you're about to give?
I do.
And could you state and spell your first and last name?
Ron Nelson, RONNELSON.
And could you state your address, please?
1311 Southeast 53rd Avenue, Portland, Oregon.
Thank you.
Please. Please go ahead, thanks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Nelson. Would you please state your name for the record?
Ron Nelson,
And would you please state your name, the name of your business and its address and location?
the name of my business is Current Energy Group. The business address is 528 North Treat Avenue, Tucson, Arizona, 85716.
And would you please state the position that you hold in that business?
I'm a founding partner.
Okay. Now, Mr. Nelson, do you have before you a public version of a document entitled Direct Testimony of Ron Nelson on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel, dated
Yes.
and that's dated July 3rd, 2024, filed in this case, and includes 19 numbered pages of narrative testimony, your resume and curriculum vitae as Appendix RNA, and Exhibit RN1, which includes SMECO's responses to data requests cited in your testimony. Is that, in fact, in front of you right now?
I do.
Okay.
It is.
Your Honor, I would like to have the public version of Mr. Nelson's pre-filed direct testimony marked for identification purposes as OPC Exhibit 1.
So marked.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Nelson, do you also have before you a confidential version of a document entitled Direct Testimony of Ron Nelson on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel, dated July 3rd, 2024, and filed in this case, which includes 19 numbered pages of narrative testimony, your resume and curriculum vitae as Appendix RNA, and Exhibit RN1, which includes SMECO's responses to data requests cited in your testimony?
I do.
Your Honor, and I would ask to have the pre-filed public and confidential versions of Mr. Nelson's direct testimony marked for identification, and we have marked the public version as OPC Exhibit 1. I would ask, Your Honor, that you mark the confidential version as OPC Exhibit 1C.
So marked.
Now, Mr. Nelson, do you have before you a document entitled Rebuttal Testimony of Ron Nelson on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel, dated July 19, 2024, and filed in this case, which includes 17 numbered pages of narrative testimony?
The date appears to be July 19th.
Okay, I apologize. I wrote that, and I don't know. July 19th. Thank you.
And yes, I do.
Thank you. Your Honor, I would like to have Mr. Nelson's pre-filed rebuttal testimony marked for identification purposes as OPC Exhibit 2.
So marked.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Nelson, finally, do you have before you a document entitled Sir Rebuttal Testimony of Ron Nelson on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel, dated July 31st, 2024, and filed in this case, which includes 9 numbered pages of narrative testimony?
I do.
Your Honor, I would like to have Mr. Nelson's Sir Rebuttal Testimony marked for identification purposes as OPC Exhibit 3.
So marked.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Nelson, were all of the documents before you that encompass your pre-filed testimony prepared by you or under your supervision and direction?
Yes.
And do you have any corrections or deletions to make to your testimony at this time?
I do have one deletion to make that I noticed in review of my direct testimony.
Okay. And could you please describe that?
Yes, it's on the table of contents. Section 2C should be deleted as there is no 2C in my direct testimony.
Okay. So you are simply asking that the table of contents section 2C be deleted?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Nelson, if you were asked the same questions today under oath, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
And is this testimony true to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief?
Yes.
And for these reasons, do you adopt these direct, rebuttal, and surrebuttal testimonies, respectively, as your sworn testimony in this matter? And that would be with the correction to the direct testimony that you described.
I do.
Your Honor, I move to admit OPC Exhibits 1, 1C, 2, and 3 into evidence in this matter.
Is there any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, Your
Okay.
Honor.
OPC's Exhibits 1, 1C, 2, and 3 will be marked and entered into the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Your Honor, the witness is now available for cross-examination.
I'm going to start with Department of the Navy.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Nelson. I'm Angelina Lee from the Department of the Navy, and I have a few questions for you.
Good afternoon.
In your direct testimony, you stated
Can
that
you hear her?
testified in quite a few states in your experience, correct?
I'm going to just interrupt you. If you could just pull that near you, I think, and make sure the light's on so the court reporter can hear you. Thank you.
Is that better, Your Honor?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Mr. Nelson, in your direct testimony, you have stated that you have testified in multiple raid proceedings in several states, correct?
Correct.
In any of those states, did the Public Service Commission adopt a combination customer and demand classification for distribution costs for FERC accounts 364 through 368?
Can you define what you mean by adopt?
They either directed the company to file their cost service study using both components, the demand and the customer related costs, or they allowed for submission of applications using those costs.
I'm just going to ask you to break it down. It's compound. So just for clarification, if you could just one part at a time.
Sure. So let me rephrase. Are you aware of, in the states where you testified, are you aware of Public Service Commissions where they authorized, approved, allow the use of both customer and demand-related costs for classification of distribution costs in their cost of service study?
Yeah, as noted, there's a lot of pieces to that question, so I'll kind of break it down piece by piece. And as you see in my rebuttal testimony, I provide direct quotes to commissions rebutting the minimum distribution study. I'm not aware of commission orders that directly rebut the basic customer approach, which is the alternative approach. I'm also not aware of direct quotes, and I did not see any put in the record, where a commission supported the minimum distribution study in an order. Almost every commission allows the utility to file anything that they want to file to support their case. So there's not very many instances in which a commission would restrict a utility from filing a certain type of cost study using a method that it would like to get into the record. I hope that makes sense.
So would it be fair to say that some of the Public Service Commission before which you have testified would permit the use of minimum system study to whether minimum size method or zero intercept to arrive at the relative proportions of customer and demand split in the classification? There's no prohibition on doing so, correct?
I would objection to the formula question. I believe a second question was asked at the end. I would just ask that it be
I
rephrased.
believe it's compound, so if you could just break it down a little,
Okay.
like
Apologize.
simply. That's okay.
So at the states where you testified, the Public Service Commission, some of the Public Service Commissions before you which you testified do use a form of minimum system study to arrive at the relative proportion of customer and demand split and the classification of distribution costs. Would that be correct to say?
Not exactly. So you said the commissions use the minimum distribution study. Commissions don't normally use the minimum distribution study in the sense that the commission's not doing the study. They're not directing it. And that's why I'm trying to bring a highlight to the lack of specifics entered into the record here. With respect to commissions, I've not seen orders in the record here that demonstrate commissions support the use of the minimum distribution study, while I've provided several orders where they specifically supported not using the minimum distribution study. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you for the clarification. In the Navy data request response 1-2, you were asked if you're aware of any electric utilities that classify any or all of the FARC accounts 364-368 as both customer and demand related. And in your response, you identified Montana, Dakota Utilities, and Oklahoma Gas and Electric Company. Is that correct?
If I may, could you provide the witness with a copy of the, do you have a copy of the data?
I do not have a copy. I apologize.
Was it one that, when was the data request served?
It was served on July 26th, I believe.
Okay, and was it circulated among the parties?
The data request and the response were provided to all the parties.
Okay. I don't have a copy of it. That's one issue. And I don't know if the witness, without viewing it, can recollect what his response was. Do you have a copy available electronically to you?
I have an electronic copy, but I was just asking if he's being asked about it, he should be shown a copy of it.
And I don't have a copy of it.
I understand, Your Honor. We did receive the response, I believe, on the afternoon of August 2nd, so I just did not have a time to prepare and bring a hard copy. I do apologize for that.
Okay. Does OPC object to her reading aloud the response, Mr. Nelson's response, to reflect his, refresh his recollection as to how he responded to that?
If I may open it, Your Honor, and then I could just confirm that it's being read. Thank you.
Yep.
I apologize, Your Honor. I'm just signing.
That's okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have it pulled up. I'm sorry.
Okay, so if you would like to refresh Mr. Nelson's, and so that it's in the record and I understand what you're referring to, the basis for your question, if you could just recite the response.
Yes, Your Honor. In response to the Navy's data request 1-2, the question was, is Mr. Nelson aware of any electric utilities that classify any or all of its FARC accounts 364-368 as both customer and demand related? And if so, please provide a listing of such utilities and the basis of Mr. Nelson's understanding. And the portion of the response that OPC provided states Montana-Dakota utilities use the minimum system approach. And also Oklahoma Gas and Electric use a method similar to the minimum system approach.
Your Honor, that is a portion, but I would ask that the entire response be read. There is an objection, and there's a little more detail.
Yes. Please read the whole thing.
Yes, Your Honor. The full response states as follows. OPC objects to this request on the basis that it is unduly burdensome. Without waiving this objection, without performing an exhaustive search, Mr. Nelson is aware of the following based on recent testimonies. Montana-Dakota utilities use the minimum system approach. See Mr. Nelson's testimony link in his resume for details of problems with the utility study. Oklahoma Gas and Electric use a method similar to the minimum system approach. See Mr. Nelson's resume for reference to his testimony across several cases on this issue. in case number PUD 2018000140, Mr. Nelson explains how OG&E's zero-intercept analysis results in statistical anomaly that has a probability of being correct near zero. Specifically, OGE ran a regression with an R squared of 1, which only happens when there is an error in the data. The data used in the regression were created by engineering staff and did not reference any system cost data. Mr. Nelson notes this is an extreme example of the problem with using the minimum system method. OG&E's methods were flawed and its data were fabricated. Minnesota utilities file both the basic customer and minimum system cost of service studies. Recently, the Xcel Energy customer charge was reduced to approximately $5 for residential customers, suggesting that the Commission was relying on a lower classification of customer costs. See docket number 21-630. And that concludes the response.
Okay, and so that's the basic. So what is your question?
My question was, apologies, I need to recollect. My question was to confirm with Mr. Nelson that in his response to Navy's data request 1-2, he had identified Montana, Dakota Utilities, and Oklahoma, I guess an electric company, as two electric companies that classify its FERC accounts 364-368 as both customer and demand related. Is that correct?
Yes, so the discovery response asked about utilities. Your previous questions asked about commissions. So there's the distinction. Trying to say that utilities can use whatever method they want to try to defend in a rate case. I'm saying that I've provided orders that where commissions have directly refuted the minimum distribution study. There's no orders in the records from commissions refuting the basic customer approach. So I'm drawing the distinction between what utilities use versus what commissions have explicitly adopted and what I'm citing in my testimony. I hope that distinction makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Okay. So there is a third utilities company mentioned in your response to data request 1-2, Xcel Energy. Would you agree that this company also proposed using a minimum system classification of distribution costs in its application?
It would depend on the application. Minnesota has a long history with this topic. I worked at the Attorney General's office there for many years, and the Commission did start using the basic customer approach while I was at the Attorney General's office. Now they more use, they look at, based on my recommendation, we're looking at multiple approaches to distribution classification, including the basic customer approach. So Xcel used to use only the minimum distribution study. Based on several testimonies, they started considering the basic customer approach as well. The Commission did, to be clear.
Is it true that the Minnesota Commission directed Xcel Energy to file multiple cost of service studies, including the minimum system study in the recent past?
Objection. I would just object as to what time period we're talking about and whether Mr. Nelson is even aware of that.
I agree. Sustained.
Okay. If I could have you turn to the page 15 of your rebuttal testimony.
I'm there.
Okay. In lines 3, 4, 5, and 6, you indicate that SMECO's minimum system study classification indicate that 66% customer classification stated in SMECO's minimum system study is concerning to you, correct?
Correct.
Did you have a chance to study the SMECO's minimum system study that was provided in this case?
Can you point me to where that was provided?
It was provided to the Department of the Navy in our request. So, per the terms of our settlement, the parties agreed that a minimum system study would be provided to the Department of the Navy upon request.
I believe I reviewed that discovery response. I didn't see an actual minimum distribution study in that response. I saw the cost of service study provided that used the minimum distribution study, but I did not see how they arrived at 66%, and I didn't see any work papers supporting that, but you could point me to those if they're...
Did you have a chance to review company's response to staff data request numbers 44-3 and 44-4?
I am not sure. I would have to review those to be able to tell.
Your Honor, at this time, I have copies of those data request responses. May I approach and share those with the witness and the parties?
Yes.
And these responses contain exhibits that are native Excel spreadsheets that were just too voluminous to print. However, I provided a copy of the summary page for each Excel spreadsheet as an attachment.
Okay, so just so we're clear, you're not offering this as an exhibit at this time. You're using it to question the witness,
I
correct?
would like to mark these as Navy Exhibit 1.
For identification?
I apologize.
Yes,
Yes.
for identification. So staff data request number 44-3 will be marked as Department of the Navy's Exhibit 1.
And I would like to ask the company's response to staff data request number 44-4 to be marked as Exhibit 2.
Okay, do you have a copy of that?
Yes, Your Honor. It's the second page of the same staple document.
Oh, okay. I see where that is. So 44-3 will be marked for identification as Department of the Navy's Exhibit 1, and staff data request number 44-4, the company's response will be marked as the Department of the Navy's Exhibit 2 for identification.
And to clarify, Your Honor, I would like the attachments along with those responses to be marked as exhibits as well.
Okay, well, you said that they're electronic, correct?
They are, and
Okay.
I can provide you an
I'll
electronic
need
copy.
those in order for them to be admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
And did you have questions for Mr. Nelson?
I did. Ms. Nelson, are you ready?
Go ahead.
Okay, so based on your review of the company's response to data request number 44-3, would you agree that the company provides the minimum system study that supports the 66% and 34% split between the customer and demand-related components in this case?
I don't know that I would agree that it supports the 66%. They're using the minimum size method. There's two approaches to estimating the minimum distribution study. The minimum size method on one hand, the zero intercept on the other. The minimum size method takes the minimum size infrastructure and estimates the cost of the minimum system based on those unit costs. The zero-intercept uses the unit costs of all data in a category and uses a linear regression. And the zero-intercept, where the line crosses y, is the unit cost used. So theoretically, the minimum size method overestimates the customer portion because there's still demand within the measure. I would also note that I'm seeing units in miles for conductor. That's not always how conductors are estimated for their costs. They're based on the type of conductor. I'd also note that this would assume to use the height of poles, while the capacity that poles carry is related to their diameter as well as their height. So I have a lot of questions. So I wouldn't go as far to say that this supports the 66%. They did provide information related to their minimum distribution study.
And to confirm, Mr. Nelson, you did not address any of your concerns in your rebuttal or your cerebral testimony. Is that correct?
I provided examples at the high level, but did not address the discovery that you've provided me here.
Turning to response to company's response to staff data request number 44-4, would you agree that SMECO provides adequate explanation as to why the percentage changed from its last case, 9688?
No, I'd have to review this in more detail to tell you whether it was sufficiently supported.
Okay. In the summary of the exhibit that he provided, SMECO indicates that the change from the last case to this case was due to a 21% increase in its overall cost of components used to determine the minimum size system between the study of its last case. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
I don't have enough detail to verify. The other issue that you run into with minimum size studies is that they oftentimes the utility doesn't use the actual minimum size. So if you're looking at conductors, they'll use a slightly larger size that's more standardized. And that's because the theory of the minimum system study is that unit costs are going to be positively linear with demand. So unit costs and demand are going to have a positive relationship to one another, and that it's going to be linear. That does not usually hold theoretically using actual system data. You get a nonlinear relationship where the smallest sizes are actually more expensive than the slightly larger sizes.
But again, your testimonies do not address SMECO's minimum system study in particular, correct?
I've not seen any of that provided in this data response either, to be able to confirm.
Okay. If I could have you turn to your rebuttal page 6. In line 10, you make a reference to a 2000 regulatory assistant project report for its statement that approximately 30 electric utilities use methods that do not classify any of the distribution system as a customer cost. Are you able to name these utilities that are referred to in this report?
I apologize. Can you repeat where you're at?
Yes. I am on rebuttal testimony, page 6, line 10 through 14.
As to the 30, the report says 30 states. I say 30 electric utilities because I figure there's one in each state at least. And so the report doesn't break out the 30 states that they're referring to.
Okay. So the report doesn't identify the utilities or the states, and you are not able to validate the statement by confirming which are those states, correct?
I can validate several, but I don't know if I can validate all 30.
And are you aware of the specific methods or used by these 30 utilities or states that are referenced in the 2000 report?
I mean, I've testified in 20 states, so I'm pretty familiar with several utilities and commissions and how they address it.
Is it fair to say that some 24 years after its publication, would you be able to validate the 2000 year RAP report about the 30 utility states at this time? After
Objection. I would say asked and answered.
yeah, I apologize.
sustained.
Is it correct that you have not attempted to determine if the assertion in the 2000 report about the 30 utilities or states is still correct today, 24 years after its publication?
I have not verified that. I've seen an electric utilities witness say that there's at least 19 states, which was Russell Feingold's testimony in a Cedar Point Energy case in Minnesota. So I would say that would be a minimum.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, staff? You have questions?
No questions from staff, Your Honor.
Company?
Good afternoon, Mr. Nelson.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for coming all the way cross-country to join us. So I don't have a lot of questions, but I just want to explore a couple of topics with you. Have you testified in cooperative rate cases before?
Yes.
And is the case that you've testified before and I'm going to butcher this potentially, the Chugach Electric Association case in Alaska?
Chugach
Chugach,
and Dakota Electric
Okay.
in Minnesota.
Okay. And are those the only two, or have you testified in others?
And then I've worked with a co-op. I think otherwise just municipals.
Okay.
But I think those are the two.
Okay. Well, would you say that in your experience in working with those two and now appearing in this case, the SMECO case here, that you have a pretty good understanding of the differences between a cooperative utility and an investor-owned utility?
That's a relative question. So, I mean,
we can explore what you know and what you don't know, so we could, if it would help to make it a little bit more detailed,
sure.
as opposed to having you say, "Yeah, I know it."
I mean, I generally know of differences.
Okay, but you would agree, though, that there are some fundamental differences between a cooperative and an investor-owned utility.
Yes, I think it's important to keep emphasis on the rate-regulated cooperative aspect.
Right, but as far as maybe starting with the largest difference is that with an investor-owned utility, they obviously have shareholders, correct, investors.
Correct.
And you would agree that a cooperative utility like SMECO or the other cooperatives that you are familiar with, that they do not have shareholders or investors. Is that correct?
Correct.
And they raise all of their equity, in a sense, from their customer members. Is that correct?
I'll leave equity to ROE witnesses.
Okay. Well, are you familiar with how are you familiar with the responsibilities of a board of directors for an investor-owned utility, generally? I'm not going to get into the details of.
Not particularly. I mean, I'm not deeply
Okay, that's fair. Would you agree, though, that a board of directors has a fiduciary duty to its shareholders?
Objection. I think that calls for legal conclusion.
I'm going to overrule if the witness knows,
Right.
though.
If you know.
I am generally aware.
And in addition to having that fiduciary duty to its shareholders, it also has a common duty with a cooperative utility to have an obligation to serve. It's a statutory obligation to provide service to the customers in its service territory. Is that correct?
Just to be clear, you're asking if both cooperatives and IOUs have
Right.
a
That would be
service
that would be a
obligation.
similarity between an IOU and a cooperative
Yes.
utility, and that they both have that obligation to serve its customers.
Objection. We haven't specified what state we're talking about, and it's unclear. Is this just a general legal question, or is it state specific?
Overruled.
You
Yes,
agree?
I
Okay.
both have
Okay. So going back,
statutory obligations, usually under the obligation to serve is.
and are you all, if you know, are you also aware that similar to investor-owned utilities, that cooperative utilities do have boards of directors that help to make decisions and guide the operations and guide senior management of cooperatives in the operation in a cooperative's operations?
I didn't testify on any of that.
But are you aware if that's
I have
the
not
case?
looked into that. No.
Okay. So are you, if you know, are you aware of the fact that the board of directors at a cooperative like SMECO is elected by its customers?
I'm not aware of how that.
And are you similarly not aware of the fact that SMECO's board members are in fact customers?
I have not reviewed any materials specific to SMECO on that.
In your review of the discovery that was provided in this case, did you have an opportunity to review a presentation to the SMECO Board of Directors regarding whether or not to approve moving forward with this case?
No, I don't believe that I did.
Could you please turn to page 17 of your direct testimony? And once you're there, just please let me know.
I am there.
I just have a couple of very minor questions. On lines 11 through 14, you ask yourself, or you're asked the question about whether customers prefer high customer charges. Do you see that?
I do.
Your response is regarding what customer advocates prefer. Isn't that, in fact, true?
Yes.
And you have not done any independent analysis of what SMECO customers would approve of in terms of customer charges. Is that correct?
I haven't seen anything in the record on that.
And you haven't independently done anything to determine that. Is that correct?
No.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if I mischaracterize your testimony, because I don't mean to, but one of the bases that you have to challenge SMECO's request regarding the facilities charge is that it could create a disincentive to engage in energy efficiency measures. Is that correct?
Yes.
And have you done any type of an independent analysis to determine the level of participation or implementation of energy efficiency measures by low-income customers in SMECO service territory?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Have you done any type of independent analysis of energy efficiency measures that are implemented by low-income customers in SMECO's service territory?
I've done general research on elasticity of demand and how investment decisions are made for energy efficiency that apply broadly to customers.
But what you're referring to is sort of like a general understanding. But I'm referring more specifically to SMECO and its service and the low-income customers that reside in SMECO service territory.
I'm commenting more on economic theory, and so the issue would be you would want to be almost demonstrating that in SMECO's service territory, economic theory doesn't apply, right? Because it's just basic that supply and demand, those types of issues are what's at play when you're increasing the fixed charge.
So the assumption is that if the economic theory is correct, it applies everywhere.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. And have you done any type of independent analysis of among low-income customers in SMECO's service territory, the percentage who rent their homes versus the percentage who own their homes?
I haven't seen any of that in the record.
And have you done any independent analysis
No.
yourself? Okay. Mr. Nelson, you spent a little time talking to Ms. Lee about cost of service. I only have a few questions on that. If I understand your testimony correctly, you've testified that Ms. Menhorn and SMECO submitted a cost of service study that is a form of the basic customer method. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if I also, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you also support using the cost of service study that the company submitted as a basis for designing and setting rates in this proceeding. Is that correct?
I don't know if I explicitly said that in my testimony. But I generally reviewed the cost of service study and didn't make any recommendations for changes.
Okay. And do you conclude in your review of the cost of service study that the cost of service study that Ms. Menhorn and SMECO submitted in this proceeding reasonably follows principles of cost causation?
At a high level.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I think I may be finished. I'm just looking over my notes. I have one final question. I'm going to sort of do a U-turn back to the discussion. And to your knowledge, if you know, are you aware of the fact, through your reading of the testimony in this case, that SMECO's customer-elected and customer-comprised board of directors approved with SMECO's rate case filing in this case, as well as the details concerning what was included in that filing?
I didn't review any material.
Okay, so you're
related to that.
you're not aware of the fact that that the facilities charge issue was raised with the board and specifically approved by the customer member elected and customer comprised board of directors of SMECO?
This is a process through the PSC, so I reviewed what was put in the rate design witness's testimony.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Nelson, I just had a quick question about rate design. Did OPC or did you note any position or recommendation with regard to the creation of SMECO's new rate classes?
We did not.
Any redirect by
Briefly,
OPC?
Your Honor.
Okay.
Mr. Nelson, if I could please draw your attention to page 15 of your rebuttal testimony.
I'm there.
And on lines 4 to 6 of page 15 of your rebuttal testimony, you were asked some questions about this from the Navy attorney. After reviewing the data response, you pointed out, you raised some questions regarding the use of miles for overhead conductors and devices. Does anything you've said on lines 4 to 6 change based on the questions you answered from the Navy attorney?
No.
Do you continue to hold opinions on lines 4 to 6 of page 15 of your rebuttal testimony?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe the next witness on the witness list is Lizelle Rory.
Yes.
Am I saying that correctly?
SMECO called Lizelle Rory to the stand, Your Honor.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the testimony that you're about to give? I do. Can you please state your first and last name and spell it for us, please?
My name is Lizelle Rory, L-E-Z-A-E-L-R-O-R-I.
And could you tell us your business address?
My business address is 15035 Burnstone Road, Eastville, Maryland, 20637.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms.
Good
Rory.
afternoon.
Could you please state your full name again and give your employer as well as your position for the record?
Sure. My name is Lizelle Rory. I am the Economic Services Director for Southern Maryland Electric Co-op.
And could you just briefly describe what your responsibilities are in that position?
Sure. My primary responsibilities are to support the analytics policy in developing distribution rates as well as other charges and fees.
And could you very briefly just please briefly state what your role is in this proceeding?
Sure. My role in this proceeding is providing testimony regarding the miscellaneous charges proposals that SMECO has submitted, as well as combining our area light and street light classes into a single lighting service class, and the updates to SMECO's tariff with regards to the distribution rates and other housekeeping items.
Great, thank you. Do you have before you a document that is entitled the Prepared Direct Testimony of Lizelle Rory dated May 1st, 2024? And it's consisting of 12 pages and 8 attached exhibits.
I do.
Okay. And do you have any corrections or changes to that testimony?
I do not.
Do you also have before you a document entitled The Prepared Rebuttal Testimony of Lizelle A. Rory dated July 19th, 2024, consisting of 7 pages and 1 exhibit?
I do.
And do you have any changes or corrections to that document?
I do not.
Your Honor, I would please ask that Ms. Rory's direct testimony be marked as SMECO Exhibit 16 for identification, and her rebuttal testimony to be marked as SMECO Exhibit 17 for identification.
So marked.
Ms. Rory, if I were to ask you the questions in both your direct testimony and rebuttal testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
And as of today, are the answers in both those pieces of testimony true and accurate to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to move SMECO's 16 and 17, the direct and rebuttal testimonies of Ms. Rory, into the record.
Is there any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay.
And
Exhibit 16 will be the direct testimony of Lizelle Rory, and Exhibit 17 will be the rebuttal testimony of Lizelle Rory.
And Ms. Rory is available for cross-examination, Your Honor.
Okay. Office of People's Counsel. Okay. Department of the Navy. Staff.
I have one or two clarifying questions, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Rory. How are you
Good
doing
afternoon.
today?
Doing well, thank you.
I'm going to refer to your rebuttal testimony, page 6. It begins on line 18. I'm looking at the Q&A series. The question is, does SMECO agree with staff witness Hoppick's recommendation regarding addressing retail choice for lighting customers in a separate proceeding? And your response is no, although retail choice language is included in Schedules SL and AL, SMECO has never offered retail choice to its lighting customer members. SMECO is not aware of any retail suppliers offering service to retail lighting customers in SMECO's service territory. Furthermore, offering such service isn't cost-effective. SMECO estimates that the cost of converting lighting customers to a retail choice option would be approximately $350,000. This estimate covers upgrades to SMECO's billing system to include custom configurations and interfaces through a phased approach of discovery and analysis, system design and development, system and user acceptance testing, training, and development of reports. Now, my question is specifically in regards to lines 21 through 22, in which you state, although retail choice language is included in Schedules SL and AL, SMECO has never offered retail choice to its lighting customer members. So to clarify, in the tariff as they exist now, does SMECO offer retail choice to lighting members?
No, we do not.
Okay, so that language is not included currently in the tariff.
It is in the tariff, but our systems are not configured to have retail choice suppliers offer lighting service to our customers.
Okay, so to clarify, that language does exist in the tariff, that it authorizes customer members that option for retail service. It's just that SMECO is not currently equipped technically to execute if a customer member does want to move forward with retail choice.
That is correct.
Okay, so if a customer member were to come forward today and seek that option pursuant to the tariff, what would SMECO's response be?
SMECO would not be able to provide that option. In the many years since retail choice was implemented, it just has not materialized for our lighting service customers. We're not aware of any retail choice provider or customer member that is interested in having lighting service be provided by a retail choice provider.
Understood. Thank you. That's all the questions I had, Your Honor.
I just have one clarifying question or follow-up. So how would you know whether there was a customer interested in retail choice or not?
Customers contact SMECO through our contact center. So we can get a call, they can come to our regional services office. There are customers that are key account members that have direct contact with members of SMECO staff. So there are a variety of ways, even online, requests could be submitted. So there are a variety of ways that our customers can contact us for specific requests, if that were the case.
I guess my question is, if someone, how would SMECO know if the response is going to be that we can't facilitate this request? How would you know if somebody, is it documented, or how would it be documented that somebody was interested in it, or would it be documented?
It would be documented. Any sort of request that comes through our contact center or online is sent to internally to the appropriate department, so it would be something that would be documented within SMECO.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just have one really quick clarifying question. But Ms. Rory, just to be clear, in your response to staff's question, was it your testimony that no customer has ever requested retail choice service in the lighting classes?
I am unaware of any customer that has requested retail choice for lighting service.
Right. That, I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Maury.
Thank you.
I think that reaches the end of our witnesses that were scheduled to testify today. I'm sorry? Well, that's good. So the next scheduled date is Wednesday, August 14th, to resume with the next two witnesses that are scheduled to speak that day at 1 p.m. That will be held on the 16th floor hearing room, as this hearing room is being utilized for a separate rate proceeding. With that being said, I'm aware of some climate issues on the 16th floor today, and that the commission room is closed on Wednesday this week, and those hearings scheduled Wednesday will be held up here. So barring, hopefully there's a remedy to whatever the situation is with the HVAC on the 16th floor on Wednesday, we will be resuming downstairs in the 16th floor hearing room at 1 o'clock. Okay? Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. We can go off the record.